You think spiritual healing means feeling good all the time, but Buddhist monks know the opposite is true. Real healing begins when you stop running from discomfort and learn to observe your pain without judgment. Today I'll show you 10 clear signs that you're finally healing through Buddhist practice. Some of them will surprise you because they seem like the opposite of what you expected. The 7th sign in particular explains why you've been crying more lately, and this is actually immense progress that most people don't understand. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment which part of the world you're watching from. Get comfortable and relax. Let's begin. Have you ever paused in the middle of a busy day and wondered, what am I actually feeling right now? It might sound like a simple question, but the truth is, most of us spend our days caught up in a swirl of thoughts about yesterday's frustrations, tomorrow's plans, or even things we wish we had said in the last conversation. In the midst of all that noise, how often do we slow down and actually notice what's happening inside of us, right as it happens? This is where Buddhist practice starts to quietly change our lives, almost before we even realize. One of the clearest signs that you're healing through Buddhist practice is an increased self-awareness and mindfulness, and this small shift can ripple through absolutely everything: how we react, how we live, how we heal. At first, you might not even label what's happening as mindfulness. Maybe you sit down for a meditation, and instead of a quiet mind, you get flooded with thoughts about the day. What's different is simply noticing these thoughts, not just being swept away by them as if you're on autopilot. Oh, I'm worrying about my job, you might realize, or wow, I feel tense in my shoulders. With regular practice, this noticing becomes more familiar, more natural. You may start to spot patterns in your thoughts and feelings. Maybe you start to see how your mind jumps to frustration when you're stuck in traffic, or how you get anxious before a meeting. The difference is that instead of getting lost in that frustration or anxiety, you can pause and become aware of it as it's happening. This kind of self-awareness grows quietly with time, often sparked by practices like meditation, breathing exercises, or even just bringing gentle attention to everyday actions like walking or eating. That means you stop living entirely on automatic pilot. Instead, you wake up more fully to each moment. You start sensing the difference between reacting right away, maybe with anger, stress, or shutting down, and simply noticing what's arising in your mind. This awareness isn't a dramatic or forced thing. It feels more like a gentle turning on of the lights inside you. You begin to recognize thoughts, emotions, and sensations as events passing through your mind and body, not as things you have to immediately act on. With repeated practice, you may notice your reactions to life changing. Instead of snapping back at someone or ruminating on a problem, you have a bit more space to choose how to respond. You might feel irritated, but rather than letting it take over, you can notice the irritation, acknowledge it, and perhaps not let it dictate your next move. This gradual shift from automatic reaction to conscious response is a huge milestone. When you can see your anger coming up, feel it, and then decide to take a breath instead of lashing out, that's healing at work, right in the middle of ordinary life. One of the hallmarks of this kind of mindfulness is that you start to notice not just the big emotions, but also the little bodily sensations and mental habits that ride along with them. You realize, for instance, that your jaw clenches whenever you feel criticized, or that your stomach knots up before an important phone call. These signals from your body become just as much a part of your awareness as your thoughts. You start tuning in to where tension sits in your body and what kinds of emotional weather are passing through your mind moment by moment. This increased self-awareness can feel surprising at times. You might even catch yourself thinking, wow, I never noticed how often my mind jumps to negative stories about myself, or I just realized how much joy I get from a quiet 5 minutes, even when nothing special is happening. That's a sign you're seeing clearly, instead of drifting through old habits without noticing. Even uncomfortable emotions become more familiar, less intimidating. You start to understand that emotions are temporary. They arise, they peak, they pass. Instead of fighting against sadness, boredom, or anxiety, you let them be there. You're learning to coexist with your mind instead of always wrestling with it. As you continue this journey, the way you relate to yourself changes. You become less identified with each thought or feeling, and more interested in simply observing them as they happen. That means you don't judge yourself so harshly for having a certain emotion or chasing after a certain thought. The internal conversation starts shifting from, how do I make this stop, to, what's really here right now? That switch turns out to be a big deal. It brings more honesty and openness, not just toward yourself, but toward everything you experience. This self-awareness extends beyond sitting meditation. With time, it bleeds into everything. You might catch yourself daydreaming during a conversation and gently bring yourself back. Even small daily routines, washing your hands, drinking water, stepping outside, become little moments to check in with yourself. Am I tense? What's running through my mind? What do I feel in my chest? These check-ins become second nature, not a project you have to force, but an easy, ongoing curiosity about what's happening inside you. But why is this increased mindfulness such a powerful signal of healing? For one, it interrupts the cycles that keep us stuck. Normally, when difficult thoughts or feelings come up, we tend to push them down, distract ourselves, or get completely entangled in them. Over time, these habits can leave us carrying a heavy load, reacting from old wounds rather than responding freshly to what's here and now. When you bring mindfulness to your thoughts and emotions, you start to name them, to see how they come and go. You realize that not every negative thought is true, and not every difficult emotion needs to run the show. There's a freedom in that kind of seeing. For a lot of people, this journey begins in moments of struggle. Maybe stress, anxiety, or sadness pushed you to look for another way. Buddhist practice teaches through direct experience that pain and discomfort are part of being alive, but our relationship to them is where suffering either tightens its grip or starts to loosen. As you learn to watch your mind with more interest and less judgment, even tough experiences become opportunities to notice, breathe, and come back to your senses. The mind's chatter may still go on, but it stops feeling like the whole story. One remarkable byproduct of self-awareness through mindfulness is its influence on your daily choices and priorities. When you notice, for example, how certain situations always raise your anxiety, or how you tend to shut down when facing criticism, that clarity gives you options. Instead of blindly repeating patterns, you have the chance to pause, investigate, and perhaps choose a different path. Over time, this leads to growth. Personal healing is not just about feeling less pain or stress, it's about changing the way you engage with your life. Contrary to what some imagine, mindfulness isn't about pushing away thoughts, banishing tough feelings, or striving for complete stillness. You're not aiming for perfection, but for the skill of noticing, again and again, what's happening, without needing to fix or escape it right away. That can be surprisingly comforting. You realize the mind is always moving, but you can learn to stay grounded in your body, in the breath, in what's here and now. It's a much gentler way of being with yourself. As your self-awareness improves, kindness toward yourself often grows as well. Instead of judging yourself harshly for having certain thoughts or emotions, you treat yourself with more friendliness and patience. The inner critic loses its power little by little. You might find yourself saying things like, "It's okay to feel this way, everyone has rough days," or "That was a tough moment, but I'm learning to notice and choose differently." This self-compassion is deeply healing in itself. It's also worth mentioning that this kind of self-awareness can reveal uncomfortable things at times. You might see old habits you wish you didn't have, or realize how reactive you can be in certain situations. That's normal. Rather than being discouraged, you start to meet those discoveries with curiosity. Why do I always tense up during conflict? Or, what happens to my breath when I get anxious? These questions aren't meant to criticize, but to understand. Curiosity gently opens doors that defensiveness would keep shut. Surprisingly, with more mindfulness, emotions that once felt overwhelming begin to shift. When you notice anger rising, for instance, you can watch it, feel it in your body, maybe even name it out loud. Instead of immediately acting out or stuffing it down, you give yourself space to see what's really going on. Maybe you realize the anger hides sadness or fear. Maybe you see that it's less threatening when you stay with it instead of running away. These kinds of discoveries add layers of understanding and care to your experience. This ongoing practice also informs your relationships. The more you tune into your own thoughts and emotions, the better you understand what others might be going through as well. When you know what it's like to have moods rising and falling, you become more patient with people around you. Arguments and misunderstandings don't have the same power to hurt or escalate because you're quicker to realize, this is just anger passing through, or my perspective right now is shaped by tiredness or hunger. Awareness gives you room to be less reactive and more present. Another quiet sign that healing is taking place is your ability to actually sit with discomfort rather than scrambling to resolve it right away. Let's say you notice feelings of envy, disappointment, or loneliness bubbling up. At first, you might want to distract yourself. scrolling through your phone, snacking, making yourself unnecessarily busy. But mindfulness gives you the courage to just notice those feelings and let them exist for a while. Over time, that discomfort loses some of its sting. You realize you can handle it, that you don't need to fix every uncomfortable moment. That's self-trust growing out of awareness. The more you practice, the more you begin to notice fleeting moments of peace in between the thoughts and emotions. At first, these moments may be subtle, just a breath, a sense of openness, or a quiet mind for a split second. As you keep going, you learn to notice and appreciate these glimpses. They become reminders that underneath the hustle and noise of the mind, there is a steady, calm presence that you can return to whenever you need it. This presence isn't far away. It's right here, accessible in every moment when you tune in. You might wonder if this kind of transformation requires hours of sitting in meditation every day. Actually, it doesn't. Even brief moments of mindful attention throughout the day add up. Each time you pause, breathe, and notice what you're feeling or thinking, it strengthens your ability to show up more fully in your life. That adds up to more clarity and more choice about how to live. Self-awareness through mindfulness is a practice, not a destination. There's always more to learn, and each day offers a new chance to notice what's really happening inside you. A subtle but powerful change that comes with mindfulness is the sense that you're less pushed around by your thoughts and feelings. Your moods may still change, but you're less likely to believe that every single one of them needs your immediate attention or action. You learn to ride the waves, knowing they'll crest and fall. This brings stability even during emotional storms. The mind becomes a little less noisy, a bit more spacious. Being able to witness what's happening without always acting on it is a sign your healing is taking root and you're becoming the author of your responses. Over time, being present with your internal experiences brings a sense of relief. Life feels less like something you have to control every minute, and more like something you can meet one moment at a time. Tiny moments of calm open up inside, almost invisibly, during even the busiest parts of the day. This is where healing happens, not in huge revelations, but in these soft moments of awareness. Every time you notice, every time you choose to respond rather than react, you're building the muscles of healing and change. Ultimately, this increased self-awareness is about reconnecting with yourself, honestly and without judgment. You see your strengths and challenges more clearly, and you start trusting your own experience. The ups and downs of life are still there, but you meet them with a mind that's a little more awake, a little more kind, and a lot more resilient. This is how the healing journey through Buddhist practice quietly transforms not just your mind, but your whole way of living. Being present even for a few seconds at a time is the ground where everything else, clarity, compassion, change, can grow. And that's something you carry with you wherever you go, moment by moment. Instead of getting swept away by old reactions and patterns all the time, another thing you might notice as you deepen your Buddhist practice is a real shift in your emotional weather. Maybe stress used to hit like a wave, and anxiety clung to you for hours or even days. With steady practice, though, your mind starts to settle down in a new way. Imagine yourself going through a situation that a year ago would have left you feeling restless, tense, maybe even a little panicked. Now you move through it, and while you still feel something, it's not that you've turned into a robot. You just notice a steadiness that wasn't there before. This is inner peace starting to take hold, and it's one of the biggest clues that healing is actually happening for you. Inner peace, in the way Buddhist practice encourages, isn't a dramatic fireworks kind of moment. It's more like realizing that the baseline tension you carried around everywhere, the worry about what just happened and the fear of what's coming next, is easing up. Your mind is still busy sometimes, but it no longer feels like you have to chase after every thought or emotion. You can actually stay grounded when life throws you a curveball, instead of spinning out into what-ifs or regrets. This kind of peace becomes more noticeable over time, especially if you make meditation or mindful breathing a regular part of your routine. You start to see how often you were living in anticipation of what could go wrong, or replaying what already did. The first sign things are changing is usually a sense of stability, even when things outside of you are messy or challenging. One of the ways this shows up is in your nervous system. It may sound technical, but it's very real. You notice your body literally calming down, shoulders drop, breathing becomes slower. It's easier to unclench your jaw. You're not forcing relaxation. It arrives on its own, like your body finally trusts that it's safe to let go a little. This often happens when you start letting go of attachments, which in Buddhist terms just means you're not gripping so hard onto a desired outcome or a particular story about how things need to be. The freedom in that is subtle but powerful. You feel lighter, less weighed down by every little thing that might go wrong. It doesn't mean you don't care. You still care deeply, but you're not trapped by the endless cycle of anxiety and wanting control. For people used to living with non-stop anxiety, this can seem almost strange at first. There might even be moments where you look around and think, why am I not as worked up about this as I usually would be? Instead of waiting for the next shoe to drop, you just address what's in front of you. You might still have responsibilities and lots on your plate, but the mental noise is quieter. You find yourself able to actually rest, not just physically, but mentally, even in the middle of a packed day. It's not a sign that you're ignoring problems or pretending that nothing matters. In fact, you may become more capable of handling challenges because you're dealing with what's real, instead of what you're afraid might happen. Think about the way someone's breathing changes when they move from worry to calm. Instead of shallow, rapid breaths that keep the body tense, your breathing becomes deeper and more natural. This kind of change comes from inside. It's the body's response to a mind that feels safer, less caught in fear. And on tough days, you notice that after a stressful conversation or unexpected news, you can bring yourself back to balance more quickly. Meditation really helps strengthen this. Even if you start with just 5 or 10 minutes a day, the practice trains your mind and body to recognize what calmness feels like. The more you get used to this, the more it becomes your go-to state, even when things are tough. Over time, you realize that letting go, whether it's of grudges, fears, or plans that didn't work out, isn't a weakness. It's making space inside for calm to take root. Another interesting sign that you're gaining inner peace is when you see yourself not chasing after things or pushing against every difficulty. When you let go of the need to control, things come and go in your life without knocking you over. Of course, problems still arise, but there's less of the exhausting mental struggle that used to come with them. You deal with what you can and let the rest settle, without letting your whole day get hijacked by worry. Sometimes people notice this most clearly when relationships or work situations don't go as planned. It might have been your pattern to dwell on what you wish you'd said or worry endlessly about how someone sees you. Now, though, you notice the urge to spiral, but you pause. You see the anxiety, but you don't indulge it. Maybe you remind yourself that things are changing all the time, and not everything is within your control. There's a confidence that begins to grow. You know you can handle what comes, not because you've got everything figured out, but because you trust yourself to face life one moment at a time. This doesn't make life problem-free, but it shifts how you deal with problems. Instead of feeling trapped by stress, you start noticing solutions or workable steps where there seemed to be only confusion before. People around you might even mention that you seem less reactive or more present, even in difficult situations. You hear yourself responding thoughtfully instead of snapping back or shutting down. One subtle benefit is that everyday annoyances lose a bit of their sting. Let's say you're stuck in line longer than you wanted, or traffic isn't moving. Where frustration used to spark instantly, now you're more likely to just notice what's happening around you, or even use that pause as a moment to breathe and check in. You aren't numb. You feel things, but they just move through a little more easily. That's the peace growing inside you, helping you recover from setbacks faster. You may find you sleep better too. Anxiety can keep you restless at night, replaying scenarios or worrying about what's coming. As you let go of that habit, your body and mind unwind and rest more deeply. It doesn't happen overnight, but the improvements in sleep, appetite, and general well-being become clear over weeks and months. A major reason this inner peace develops in Buddhist practice is the idea of letting go of attachments. The more you practice observing your mind, the less you identify with every urgent worry or desire for things to go a certain way. You recognize thoughts and emotions as temporary visitors. You don't have to let them move in and take over. There's an old saying that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. This means that while difficult things will always come your way, the suffering comes mostly from how tightly you hold on to them or try to avoid discomfort at all costs. When you allow things to just be what they are, without gripping, you discover pockets of peace that were hidden underneath all the control and resistance. Daily meditation or breathing exercises also teach your mind to become an observer rather than a judge. You start recognizing that worry often comes from focusing on the future or on things beyond your reach. When you bring your focus back to the now, your breath, your environment, even your senses, you realize most of the time you are actually all right in this present moment. This realization is deeply calming. It shrinks that endless list of what-ifs down to the simple fact that right now you have the tools to cope. Another way inner peace shows up for people is in their physical health. High anxiety takes a toll on your body. Higher blood pressure, cramps, headaches, stomach trouble, all of that can be tied to chronic worry. When you begin letting go and living with more acceptance, your body relaxes. Over the long run, many people feel healthier, more energetic, and less affected by everyday stressors. What's interesting is that this peace doesn't require escape from the world, and it doesn't depend on everything being perfect. In fact, you often discover calm exactly where life feels most chaotic. You respond rather than react, and that sense of being anchored carries you through highs and lows. You become more honest with yourself about sensations and feelings, and that self-acceptance clears away much of the tension that used to live under the surface. Sometimes anxiety hangs around not because of what's happening in the moment, but because of fears built up over time, old experiences, what we've learned from our families, or even a sense that peace is something we don't deserve or can't reach. Buddhist practice, especially when done with regularity, cuts through these old habits. Instead of layering new worries on top of the old ones, you start letting the old ones dissolve, little by little. It's also worth noting that the calm and peace you develop doesn't mean you stop caring. You can still be passionate, dedicated, and work hard. The difference is that you aren't driven by panic or pressure. You show up as your true self, focused and engaged, but not ruled by the ups and downs of emotions. Many people realize after a while that they have more emotional flexibility. For example, when something unexpected happens, you might still feel nervous, but you recover faster. You can name what you're feeling. This is anxiety or this is stress, but you don't add long stories to it or judge yourself for having the feeling. You know it's just part of being human, and the wave will pass. That attitude gives you a kind of emotional freedom. It allows you to move on with your day after a rough patch instead of being overwhelmed for hours. You might find yourself genuinely smiling or laughing more often, even if nothing special is going on. The lighter mood is a clue that the constant undertow of worry is not ruling your days anymore. People may even comment that you seem lighter or happier, even if you haven't told them anything about your practice. This lighter energy spreads too. It often influences those around you, like family, friends, or even strangers. With this kind of inner peace, decision-making becomes easier as well. You're less likely to overthink every choice or be paralyzed by what-if scenarios. You trust your judgment more, decide, and move on. When things don't work out, you're able to adjust without so much self-blame or lingering regret. This increases confidence and self-trust, both of which are essential for a fulfilling life. When situations outside your control arise, a sudden job change, an unexpected illness, someone else's bad mood, you now have the skills to manage your own reaction instead of being swept away. You learn to let others have their feelings without taking them on as your own burden. That's not indifference. It's a kind of wisdom and boundary setting that helps keep your peace intact, even when everything around you is shifting. The journey to this kind of calm might be slow. You may notice improvements in brief moments at first, a single deep breath in a tense conversation, or a pause before you respond to upsetting news. But these small wins build up over time. Your baseline shifts, and peace feels more natural than crisis mode. Eventually, it becomes your default, the place your mind returns to on its own. This healing also makes it easier to enjoy quiet moments, which sometimes get lost when you're stuck in constant stress. Ordinary things, walking outside, making tea, listening to music, start to feel restful again. Your senses wake up and the world seems more friendly. It's not that your life has become free of problems, but that your ability to stay grounded and content is much stronger. Some people worry that getting peaceful will make them lose their drive or motivation. In reality, most discover they have even more energy for the things that matter, because you're not wasting so much energy on rumination or old fears. You have more to give to your passions, work, or loved ones. It's a very practical kind of healing, not magic, not about being oblivious to reality, but about handling reality with more balance. Letting go of constant anxiety means you start experiencing more satisfaction with life in general. You feel less chased by time, money, or expectations. Small problems don't snowball the way they once did, and you can genuinely look forward to parts of your day without wondering what disaster might be around the corner. Even setbacks look different. Instead of seeing them as proof that something is wrong with you or your life, you see them as part of a bigger, ongoing process. Not every day is peaceful, not every moment is easy, but you trust your foundation more than before. You know how to find your center, the place inside that's steady no matter what's happening outside. All in all, this kind of peace lets you meet life's changes with more wisdom. You know you will have bad days and good, painful moments and joyful ones, but you don't feel the need to fight against the difficult ones or cling to the happy ones. It's a steadiness that helps you show up for yourself and for other people with a clear mind and a calm heart. This is one of the most practical and real benefits that Buddhist practice offers as you continue on your path of healing. When you start bringing more steadiness and balance to your experience each day, it naturally opens you up to something else that's really central to Buddhist practice: the gradual unfolding of compassion, both for yourself and for the people around you. This isn't just about being nice or polite, and it doesn't require you to suddenly turn into a saint. Instead, it comes from seeing yourself more honestly and gently, which spills over in how you treat others. Self-compassion and compassion for others begin to grow almost without you noticing it, bit by bit, in regular life. There's a moment in everyone's process where, after dealing with anxiety or stress for so long, you might start asking yourself, what would happen if I stopped beating myself up for feeling this way? Often, the first signs of compassion come up when you face a mistake, a failure, or an old regret, and instead of launching into harsh self-criticism, you pause. You might even notice yourself saying something like, okay, that was tough, but I'm not the only person who's messed up. Instead of replaying the pain over and over, you start to accept it, forgive yourself, and move on. This ability isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just dropping one small judgmental thought and giving yourself a break. That's compassionate work. This change might be subtle at the start. For a long time, you might not have even realized how much you were judging yourself or carrying around old disappointments. But as you continue with Buddhist practices like mindfulness, breathing, and reflecting, you get to know that inner critic very well. You recognize the ways it pops up, maybe after an argument, a bad day, or a simple mistake. Yet with practice, that criticizing voice loses some of its power. In its place, a gentle, encouraging voice begins to show up. You give yourself permission to be a work in progress, to learn and to heal. That's compassion, and it often marks a real step forward in a person's healing. A cool part of this self-compassion is that it helps you stick with your intentions or positive habits without falling apart when things don't go perfectly. Before, you might have tried meditation, healthy eating, or kindness to others, only to quit after a slip-up out of shame or frustration. As compassion grows, you realize it's normal to stumble and that you can always start over. You might miss a meditation or lose your temper, but you catch yourself sooner, forgive, and just pick up where you left off. This soft approach isn't about making excuses. It's about steady support and patience with yourself. Now, while self-compassion is taking shape, something else tends to happen. Your heart starts to open up toward other people, sometimes even people you don't know personally or wouldn't have felt much sympathy for in the past. Buddhist practices often include meditations designed to stir up feelings of goodwill, or what's sometimes called loving kindness. You practice silently wishing happiness, health, and peace for yourself, but also for others, from loved ones to strangers, and even people you might have trouble with. It starts as a formal exercise, but soon enough it leaks into real life. Maybe you notice yourself feeling less irritated at a co-worker or more patient with a family member who gets on your nerves. These aren't huge moments, but you recognize you're not holding on to anger or resentment as long as you used to. Compassion for others also shows up in the way you listen. Instead of always steering conversations back to your own problems or opinions, you find yourself listening for real, giving attention, being present without jumping in to judge or fix. When a friend is having a hard time, you might find yourself saying, "That sounds really rough. I've felt something similar before," instead of rushing to offer solutions. You can be with them in their pain without feeling like you have to rescue them or pretend everything's fine. Just being able to stay present, patient, and kind is a huge shift for a lot of people. Another real marker is how you react to people you don't know who might normally annoy or anger you. Maybe someone cuts you off in traffic, or a stranger is rude in line. In the past, irritation used to take over quickly. Now you start to see that everyone is carrying something, maybe stress, pain, or confusion. You realize the other person's irritation isn't only about you. Maybe you still get annoyed because you're human, but you notice you recover more quickly. You might even silently wish them well, knowing that happy, calm people rarely try to make others miserable. This doesn't mean you become a pushover, but it's a sign that your sense of connection and empathy is deepening. You'll notice that your acts of kindness become less about earning approval or proving you're a good person, and more about a genuinely open wish for others to do well. Simple things like holding the door or giving a compliment begin to feel more natural, less forced. Sometimes you help out even when no one will ever know, just because it feels right. Steadily, these actions build a sense of warmth and connectedness that's often missing in modern life. People sometimes worry that too much compassion, especially for others, means putting everyone else first or forgetting about themselves. When Buddhist teachings talk about compassion, it's not about dropping your own needs or becoming a martyr. Instead, it's about seeing that, at the core, everyone wants the same things: to be safe, happy, and understood. When you start treating yourself with the same care you wish for your friends or family, it becomes much easier to offer it outward, in a way that doesn't leave you empty or exhausted. Letting go of old grudges is a big part of healing too. Maybe you have memories of people who wronged you, criticism that still hurts, or disappointments that never got resolved. With more compassion, you begin to understand that everyone is messed up sometimes, including yourself, and holding on to resentment only freezes you in place. Forgiving others doesn't mean forgetting what happened or letting anyone hurt you again, but it does free you from carrying around emotional baggage long after the fact. Many people describe feeling lighter when they practice forgiveness, even if it's mainly internal. Sometimes it's just letting go of the mental story that keeps pain alive. This shift can change the tone in families, friendships, and even with strangers. Where maybe arguments used to drag on for days, or a single comment could ruin your mood, you now find recovery coming quicker. You let little mistakes or misunderstandings roll off instead of turning them into big events. You might even find yourself reaching out to apologize, patch things up, or simply move on to more meaningful interactions instead of stewing. Relationships start to reflect more of what you truly want: honesty, support, and understanding, because you're showing up with those qualities yourself. There's an old idea that you have to love yourself before you can truly love anyone else, but in practice, it doesn't have to be so dramatic or absolute. What's clear is that the less you beat yourself up, the less likely you are to lash out at others or carry resentment. You save your energy for caring, helping out, and supporting people close to you. You don't expect perfection from anyone, not yourself, not others, so disappointments and mistakes become easier to work through. One thing that starts to stand out is your empathy for people whose lives and backgrounds are different from yours. The more you see your own ups and downs, the more you recognize the humanity in everyone around you. News stories, social issues, or simple encounters in your neighborhood take on a different meaning. You care not because you feel guilty, but because you know what it's like to face pain, doubt, and hope. Maybe you become more generous with your time, your patience, or your understanding. This growth in compassion is not just a mental thing either. There are changes in your emotional life and even in your body. People often notice that, as they let go of hostility and self-hate, tension in the body drops and health improves. The world stops feeling so dangerous, and relationships have more room for trust and closeness. Even disappointment stings less because your sense of worth is not so fragile. As you continue practicing, you find there's less need to defend yourself or put up walls. Maybe criticism rolls off more easily, or you're able to admit mistakes without hiding or blaming others. This honesty and vulnerability can actually strengthen relationships because you're spending less energy pretending or posturing. Instead, you're available for real understanding and connection. No one grows compassion in a straight line. There are still days when you slip into old habits, judging, snapping at someone, or blaming yourself for something that went wrong. But what sets you apart now is recovery. You catch yourself sooner and come back to kindness for both yourself and whoever's involved. You don't expect to never get upset, but you trust yourself to respond better and repair when things go sideways. That's growth. You might also notice a small but important change, your sense of satisfaction and joy when things go well for others. Instead of feeling jealous, threatened, or left out, you're more likely to be genuinely happy for friends, family, or even co-workers when something good happens for them. This kind of sympathetic joy is a really satisfying aspect of compassion. It makes you feel included in other people's happiness instead of isolated by comparison or competition. The practice of compassion also creates a buffer against shame and guilt. When old memories pop up or you become aware of a past action that wasn't your best, you find a way to learn from it instead of letting it define you. You might think to yourself, I made a mistake there, but I'm trying to do better now. This attitude helps you release what you can't change while not running away from responsibility. It's a clear way of breaking the cycle of self-blame and resentment that holds so many people back. As you develop these compassionate habits, daily interactions change. You leave more room for people to be human, to mess up, and to have bad days. You're not as quick to label others as bad or wrong, but try to see what might be going on beneath the surface. It doesn't mean that you excuse truly hurtful behavior, but you separate the action from the person, knowing that everyone is shaped by things you can't always see or understand. A stronger sense of compassion also reduces isolation. You feel more connected, not in a dramatic or mystical way, but simply because you understand shared human struggles. When you support others or let yourself be supported, you realize there's a network of care and goodwill that you're part of. This can be especially helpful in tough times, making you feel less alone. In work settings and communities, this approach builds trust. When people know they can be honest without being judged, cooperation rises and conflicts settle down more quickly. If you're in a position to lead or manage, even small acts of understanding or patience set the tone for everyone else. At home, this compassion blesses family life. Arguments or stress still happen, but they don't turn so easily into blame games or silent treatments. You're more open to forgiving and being forgiven, and there's simply more laughter and ease in daily life. Kids, partners, and even pets seem to respond to the lighter mood. Importantly, this isn't about forcing positive feelings, pretending to care, or denying frustration or sadness. True compassion includes space for tough conversations, limits, and honest feedback. You might still need to distance yourself from toxic behavior or speak up when someone's out of line, but you can do it without malice. That's maturity, and it grows from self-respect and respect for others. When setbacks happen, loss, illness, failure, your compassionate habits serve as emotional first aid. You instinctively turn toward comfort, not just for yourself, but for those who are also affected. The pain is still real, but there's a cushion of understanding that supports you as you work through it. You become better at both giving and receiving help, which helps healing take root in lasting ways. Over the course of weeks, months, and years, what you realize is that compassion quietly becomes part of your identity. It guides your tone in conversations, choices about how to spend time and energy, and the way you see yourself and others. This steady presence of goodwill, patience, and forgiveness transforms not just how you feel, but how you live, bringing more meaning and stability than any quick fix or surface change ever could. This is what it looks like as real compassion sinks in, both for yourself and for the people who make up your world. It isn't a flashy process, but it's powerful, and it shows up most clearly not in big gestures, but in what you choose to do and how you choose to feel about yourself and those around you, day by day. When you start living your days with more compassion for yourself and for others, something else shifts in your daily habits and routines. It might not be obvious at first, but slowly you begin to notice that patterns you thought were just how you are, or things you assumed would never change, are actually losing their grip on you. For so many people on a Buddhist path, one really concrete sign that healing is happening is watching your dependence on old harmful habits and addictions start to fade. This isn't about miracle cures or making promises to never struggle again. It's about bringing real awareness to what's driving those habits and slowly learning how to let go without beating yourself up. A lot of times, these patterns have been around for a long time. Maybe you've tried to quit something a dozen times. Maybe you run to a certain behavior or substance when you're feeling stressed or sad. It could be anything really. Eating too much, drinking, smoking, scrolling endlessly on your phone, gambling, shopping, losing hours to video games, or even just zoning out and avoiding life. The details are different for everybody, but what they have in common is that urge to distract yourself from discomfort or pain. You turn to these habits because they give you a quick relief. The problem is, the relief never lasts. Buddhist practice doesn't ask you to pretend these urges away or shame yourself for having them. Instead, it invites you to get curious about what's happening when that urge shows up. When you're paying attention, really noticing the build-up, the emotions, the thoughts behind a craving, you get a chance to break the automatic cycle. You might start by simply observing, "I'm feeling restless right now," or "that old feeling of loneliness is here." This mindfulness gives you a pause, and in that pause, something opens up. It doesn't mean the urge disappears, but you're no longer running on autopilot. That's the first step in detachment from harmful habits. Over time, you find that with steady practice, the space between the urge and the reaction gets a little bit wider. Maybe you used to head straight for the fridge or the convenience store the second you felt bored or anxious, but now you notice what's happening in your body. You feel your hands clench, your chest tighten, or your mind racing, naming it as it happens. There's that craving again, lets you witness it from the outside, instead of letting it run the show. Sometimes you still follow the old urge, but you start doing it less automatically, with more understanding. That awareness alone is a kind of power. A lot of people are surprised by how much guilt and shame used to drive their habits. When you're stuck in a cycle, you might criticize yourself for being weak or broken. The Buddhist approach is different. It recognizes that everyone deals with discomfort and seeks relief. This is part of being human, not a personal flaw. That realization helps soften your self-blame, which, ironically, makes it easier to actually face the habit directly. When you stop running from guilt, you can meet your experience honestly and make fresh choices. One thing you start to notice is the difference between real need and habitual reaction. Maybe you are honestly tired and need rest, but your routine is to eat junk food or binge-watch shows late into the night. Maybe stress at work drives you to grab your phone and lose hours in scrolling, even though it never actually helps. Through mindfulness, you learn to check in. What do I really need right now? Am I hungry, tired, stressed, lonely, or just bored? Sometimes you'll catch yourself and realize you could call a friend, go for a walk, or just sit quietly for a minute. Other times you might still fall back on old habits, but you catch it faster and the self-judgment is softer. As this process continues, your sense of agency grows. You see that you have a choice, even if it's just for a second, before the habit takes over. This is the letting go that comes from Buddhist teaching. Not forcing things, but making gentle space between the urge and the reaction, and trusting that you don't have to be trapped forever. Letting go happens practice by practice, day by day, breath by breath. Buddhist meditation and mindful breathing are practical tools here. Many people in recovery or just trying to change their routines will use short daily practices to ground themselves. Even if you have only 5 or 10 minutes, sitting with your body and noticing your breath teaches you to stay present with discomfort. That way, when a craving or old thought shows up, you already have some practice in just breathing and watching. You realize that the urge rises, strong, noisy, convincing, and then, if you don't instantly react, it starts to fall again. Urges have a cycle. By just making it a little further each time before you act on it, you start to recognize the difference between feeling something and having to act on it. Over months, these small changes add up. You might mark the first evening you go without a drink, the first day you skip your usual fast food stop, or the first weekend you spend outside instead of lost online. The slips may still happen, but the recovery is faster. You're not so devastated, not so swept up in self-hatred if things don't go perfectly. That ability to forgive yourself is crucial. It lets you get back on track instead of giving up at the first mistake. Another aspect of this healing comes from understanding the roots of your habits. Buddhist teachings often encourage looking under the surface. Where does this urge really come from? Is there an old hurt, some anxiety, a story you still believe about yourself? When you watch your cravings closely, sometimes you see that what you're really after is comfort, control, or even love. Knowing this helps you respond differently to yourself. Instead of calling yourself lazy or hopeless, you treat the craving as a signal. It's a sign you need care. Maybe you journal, call someone who understands, or let yourself rest honestly instead of pushing through with another distraction. For a lot of people, it helps to remember that detachment is not about denying pleasure or forcing yourself to be miserable. The point isn't to become numb or live without any comfort. Instead, you're learning to swap habits that bring regret and pain for choices that really do nurture you. When a tough day hits, you might notice your tension and decide to take a walk, have some tea, or even just put your phone away and breathe. These little choices are what show you that change is really possible, even if it's slow. Sometimes people are nervous that letting go of their vices or distractions will leave them empty or bored. What happens, though, is that as you detach, other interests and joys return. You might find yourself being more present with friends, getting into music, reading, or simply enjoying downtime in a way you didn't before. You stop needing as much escape because you don't feel as trapped in the first place. This doesn't mean you never feel the urge for old habits. It means that you have more tools, more support, and a bigger sense of possibility every time the choice comes up. With time and intention, some cravings begin to lose their urgency. You realize you don't reach for a drink or a snack every time you're sad or stressed. Maybe you go 3 days, then a week, and then longer, before noticing that the old behavior just isn't calling you as loudly. When you do have a setback, you're able to see it as part of the learning curve, not a verdict on your worth as a person. Often, as your attachment to these habits fades, your relationships start to change too. Maybe you were used to hiding your actions, keeping secrets, or closing down emotionally. With healing, there's less hiding and more openness. You may even talk with people you trust about what's changing, and you notice who supports you and who doesn't. Sometimes that means letting go of old friendships or routines that supported the habit, and that can be hard, but you realize your well-being matters more than trying to fit in to please someone else. Support can come from many directions: community groups, friends, family, or even connecting with others who are going through something similar. Buddhist communities often emphasize Sangha, or community, as a source of encouragement and accountability. Being around people who understand and don't judge you makes it easier to keep going and to remember that healing is a path, not a finish line. Along with changes in your habits, you'll probably also notice shifts in your emotional state. There's less shame, less inner criticism, and more patience. You stop expecting yourself to be perfect, and you become less identified with your past struggles. It's possible you start feeling lighter, physically, mentally, or both. Even when setbacks happen, the part of you that trusts in your own ability to change gets a little stronger each time. You might also discover more energy and attention for other things. When so much of your brain is no longer occupied by cravings, regrets, or planning your next escape, that space can be filled with new passions or just more peace. Some people use the time and money they used to spend on their habit for things that feel good in a deeper way, maybe traveling, learning, volunteering, spending time outdoors, or being with loved ones. The idea isn't to just stay busy, but to notice what really feels meaningful and nourishing to you, instead of what just distracts or numbs you. It's important to recognize that detachment doesn't stop you from feeling. You'll still have hard days, difficult emotions, and moments where you want to retreat into old habits. The difference is, you're able to watch these feelings without letting them decide everything for you. You can sit with frustration, boredom, or longing and breathe through it. Even if a craving lasts 20 minutes or seems to come out of nowhere, you know it won't last forever. That knowledge reduces its power little by little. A practical part of Buddhist practice is recognizing that you are not your thoughts or habits. You have urges and tendencies, but you also have awareness and the ability to choose. That sense of choice is incredibly empowering. Every time you choose to wait, to breathe, or to reach out for something healthier, you are laying down a new pathway. Habits may be strong, but none of them are set in stone. Something worth focusing on is the sense of self-forgiveness that grows with Buddhist practice. You accept that slipping up is part of growth, not a reason to quit. If you fall back on a habit, you can ask, what happened and what can I try differently next time? This attitude keeps you engaged in change, instead of running into spirals of shame or giving up completely. People around you often notice when you're changing. They might comment on your energy, patience, or focus. Some may not understand, and that's okay. What matters is that you're learning what actually works for you. Over weeks, months, and even years, you celebrate not just the big victories, the month without a drink, the year without smoking, the season of healthy routines, but also the small ones. A single meal cooked mindfully, a phone call made when you wanted to isolate, a night you spent trying something new instead of falling into old patterns. Buddhist practice offers language and perspective for what's going on, a reminder that clinging, craving, and running from discomfort are not failures, but universal conditions. Some days are easier than others, but over time, you cultivate an identity that is more than your worst moments. You begin to recognize what triggers you, what kinds of days make old habits tempting, and you build strategies that fit your lifestyle rather than pushing yourself into rigid, punishing routines. What's really meaningful here is the gradual sense of freedom. Old behaviors or addictions that used to feel like life sentences now become part of your story, not the whole story. You find satisfaction and even moments of pride, not in being perfect, but in showing up for yourself, noticing your needs, forgiving your setbacks, and actually living differently. There's room for humor again, for friendships you can trust, and for experiences you don't have to hide. The process isn't quick or linear. You'll have days where things feel easy and others where you wonder if you're making any progress at all. But over months and years, something fundamental has shifted. You know yourself better. You spend less energy hiding, blaming, or running. You become a bit more present for what's actually happening, cravings or not, highs and lows. And that presence feels more solid. Even when challenges come back, you believe in your ability to handle them. Throughout it all, the sense of detachment that Buddhist practice describes is not about cutting yourself off from life or pretending you don't want comfort. Instead, it's about knowing there's space for all of your experiences and that you aren't powerless against your own mind. Every craving, every habit, every setback becomes one more chance to practice, to return to your breath, and to remind yourself that change is possible. The freedom that comes with not being ruled by old habits isn't flashy, but it's valuable, and it gives you space to really show up for your own life. That deeper sense of freedom, where old habits and cravings don't decide everything for you, leads to an even more important kind of shift in how you see the world and your place in it. One of the clearest signs you're moving forward in Buddhist practice is when you start feeling a true change in your relationship with the idea of impermanence and change. At first, this sounds kind of abstract. Most of us know, logically, that things change and nothing lasts forever, but actually living that truth is something different. The more you practice, the more you actually start to notice this principle working in your everyday experience, and it begins to change the way you deal with plans, disappointments, loss, and even the future. Nobody gets through life without some sort of loss or big transition. There are job changes, homes you leave behind, relationships that end, loved ones who pass away, and sometimes your health or ability shift over time. Even small changes, a favourite restaurant closing, a close friend moving away, even the simple routine you love being interrupted, these things can shake your balance if you resist them. What usually happens is you get attached to things staying a certain way, and when they don't, you fight it or feel bad about it. That's just normal human stuff. But when you really start practicing with awareness, it's like you develop a different kind of flexibility, and letting go of how things should be isn't so painful. A major part of this comes from seeing, almost in real time, that everything is always in motion. It's not just the seasons changing or people getting older. Relationships have ups and downs, even feelings that seemed permanent can fade, and the circumstances of your life shift in ways you never saw coming. The more closely you observe, the more you notice this isn't a problem to solve, but a fact of how life works. Instead of feeling like you're being punished, you begin to understand it's just the nature of things. There's something comforting about learning to expect change and accept it, even if you might not like it in the moment. For example, you might have a period where everything feels stable. The job is going well, relationships are smooth, your health is good. In the past, you might cling to that sense of security, worried about when the other shoe would drop. With more experience and mindfulness, you recognize, hey, this is good right now. Let me enjoy it while it lasts, knowing it probably won't last forever. That doesn't make you negative or cynical. On the contrary, it gives you more permission to enjoy life as it is. And when things shift, you're not as shocked or thrown off. You know nothing is meant to be static forever. People also notice that dealing with loss or disappointment changes when you have this perspective. Maybe a friend moves away, you lose a job, or you have to adapt to new circumstances you didn't ask for. Instead of sinking into, why is this happening to me? Or when will this end? You remember that it's part of the cycle. Sometimes the sadness or frustration is sharp. but it passes more naturally because you don't grip it as hard. You start allowing yourself to feel the loss, but you don't let it define your identity or your future. This is an enormous relief for people who have spent their whole lives fighting against everything that goes wrong. With this outlook, you also notice how you relate to positive changes. If you land something great, a raise, a new relationship, a lucky break, you know not to get overly attached or try to force it to last a certain way. You learn to ride the good waves without expecting them to last forever or panicking when things change. This doesn't mean you don't celebrate or feel joy. It just means you're not as dependent on tying your self-worth or happiness to things you can't control. This leads to a real kind of contentment because your sense of satisfaction isn't built on the fantasy that you can lock the good stuff in place forever. Mundane, everyday moments start to reveal how change is always happening. Your body feels different than it did 10 years ago. People come in and out of your life. Projects get finished, others start. Even your mood and health can fluctuate over the course of a week or even a single day. Instead of feeling yanked around by these shifts, you find yourself able to greet them with a kind of respect, even if you don't love every change. There's a subtle wisdom in knowing this will pass, whether it's a tough morning, an argument, a joyful evening, or a streak of luck. Sometimes people think that learning about impermanence is going to make them more anxious or less invested in life. It's actually the opposite for most who stick with the practice. When you see that everything comes and goes, you don't have as much pressure on yourself to control every outcome. It's not about not caring, it's about caring without desperation. You can show up fully for your life, give your energy and love and ideas, but there's a little voice inside saying, even if this ends or changes, I'll be okay. Getting older is a natural place where these lessons sink in. You see your body change. Maybe you deal with the reality of people around you growing old too, or even dying. Buddhist practice doesn't sugarcoat these truths, but meets them head on. There's less denial and less drama, and somehow that honesty brings more peace than always trying to hold time still. You may even find yourself grieving in a more open and honest way. When hard things happen, you let yourself cry, talk to people, and when the time feels right, move forward. There is a strength in accepting the flow of time and changes in your body and your world. Equally, living with impermanence changes how you plan for the future. You might still set goals and work hard, but you become more flexible about how to get there. If something blocks your plans, gets delayed, or unfolds differently, you see options and new directions instead of seeing it as the end of the road. You get better at improvising and forgiving yourself when things don't go the way you imagined. This actually makes you more creative because being less attached to one specific outcome frees you to see different possibilities. It's easy to underestimate how much day-to-day suffering comes from wanting things to be different than they are. With this new insight, you start to recognize the mental tension that grows when you dig your heels in and resist what's happening. Maybe you want a relationship to last forever, a job to never change, your body to always work the same way. When things shift, if your whole sense of identity is tied up in staying the same, that change feels like a crisis or a threat. Instead, as you practice awareness, the tension eases. You give yourself room to update your plans, your expectations, and even your sense of who you are. There's also a lot to be said about how this acceptance shows up during crises or sudden shocks. When unexpected bad news lands, your first reaction might still be pain or panic. As you train in accepting impermanence, you can move faster to a place of steadiness. You say to yourself, this is hard and it will change. Not because you're minimizing your feelings, but because you've lived through enough cycles to know how real that is. Even in the hardest situations, knowing that the sharpest pain does dull with time gives you a kind of foundation you might not have had before. You could notice this acceptance even with small daily things. Maybe your favorite cup breaks, there's a tech hiccup at work, or you miss out on an event you were looking forward to. In the moment, you might still get annoyed or disappointed, but the feeling passes more quickly. You don't dwell or build the moment up into a huge story about how things always go wrong for you. Instead, you just move on. The little things don't pile up the way they used to, letting you enjoy more peace and more energy for what matters. This practice also has a big impact on how you relate to other people. When you know deeply that people and situations are always changing, you give more room for growth and mistakes. Maybe a friend acts out of character, or a family member lets you down. Instead of labeling them forever, you remember they're having a hard moment. Maybe things will shift. You don't hold people in the same fixed role or identity. This helps with forgiveness and allows for healthier, more resilient relationships. Another beautiful change is that you let yourself evolve too. You're not stuck in old labels or roles, and when you want to grow, you see that as natural, even if it means leaving comfort zones. Attempts at change, starting a new job, developing a hobby, moving or updating a belief you grew up with, become less scary because you aren't expecting everything to remain the same forever. You know you'll have highs and lows as you adapt, but nothing needs to define you for all time. Your ability to deal with uncertainty also changes. Before, not knowing what would happen might have kept you up at night or made every small risk seem huge. Now, there's a bit more breathing room. You may still get nervous when plans are unsettled, but you also see uncertainty as a natural ingredient in life, not something you have to solve before you can move forward. This shifts how you view risk. New jobs, relationships, moves, or big decisions come with the understanding that I don't know exactly how things will go, but I can handle whatever comes with flexibility. It's important to admit this doesn't mean you want or welcome every change. Loss and change are sometimes painful, and some are genuinely unfair or hard. Accepting impermanence doesn't turn you into someone who's happy about loss. It just gives you an ability to feel the pain and keep moving through life with a little less resistance. You become better at finding help, seeking comfort, and coming back to center when things are tough. In practical terms, you spend fewer days stuck, more days adapting, and finding the next step. In daily life, you may find yourself cleaning out old things more easily, not clinging to stuff that doesn't serve you. You might say goodbyes, let go of projects, or end relationships that really aren't useful anymore without feeling shattered. There is a relief when you can say, I learned what I needed to from this, or it's okay if this chapter is done. This approach also makes it easier to enjoy the people and things you love, because you're not distracted by anxiety over when it might end. You can appreciate your kids growing up, the fun times with friends, a healthy stretch of life because you know not to take these things for granted. Paradoxically, knowing things are not forever doesn't make you love them less. It lets you soak them in even more, since you don't waste time worrying about holding on. Another upside is that you can help others deal with change too. When family, friends, or colleagues are facing transitions, losses, or uncertainty, your calm acceptance can be a comfort. You listen better, encourage flexibility, and sometimes even inspire others to see possibility where they saw only endings. Your steadiness isn't just for you. It can be a resource for the people around you, making your presence one that is trusted during times of trouble. It really stands out when you start seeing new beginnings not as threats, but as opportunities. If a job ends, a friendship changes, or you relocate, you look for what's next. Instead of clinging to the way it was, you give yourself time to mourn, but also turn your attention forward. This can be empowering, especially if you felt stuck or helpless in the past. Learning to embrace impermanence is a process that unfolds over years. It starts with small moments and grows into a deeper trust that you can handle the ups and downs of life. There is less need to force things, less willingness to fight every change, and more faith that you can adapt. Your focus shifts from obsessing over what might go wrong or what you might lose to making the most of what's here right now. Above all, the acceptance of change and impermanence brings resilience. Life isn't any less unpredictable, but you don't shatter as easily. When something ends, you grieve, you regroup, and you move ahead, sometimes slowly, sometimes quickly, but always with the sense that you aren't alone and you aren't doomed to repeat old pains forever. You know that everything, including tough times, will move on. Practicing this truth day after day doesn't require special rituals or perfect insight. It can mean just pausing in a moment of disappointment, noticing the waves of emotion, letting them move through, and realizing you're still here on the other side. It means clearing out clutter, not only in your house but in your mind, so you can move with your life instead of always pulling against it. This awareness lands you solidly in the present. You spend less energy worrying about the future, less time reliving the past. You show up for what's happening right now, knowing that it's precious and that nothing is frozen in place. That gives you the energy and courage to keep going, no matter what changes tomorrow brings. And as you find yourself spending less energy worrying about what's coming next or holding on tightly to the past, you naturally start to see your perspective on life shift to something that's a lot kinder and richer. Gratitude becomes something that sneaks up on you, not because you're forcing yourself to focus on what's good, but because when you're grounded in the present, you end up noticing the actual details of your life more often. It's not about pretending everything is great or ignoring the challenges. Instead, you find yourself genuinely appreciating small small and big things that are happening right now. This is not just a passing mood, it's a real, deepening sense of gratitude that can become woven into your everyday life as you continue on the Buddhist path. At first, gratitude might look like quick flashes, moments where you catch how the late afternoon light falls on your kitchen table, or how someone you love laughs at your joke, or even how a warm breeze feels on your face on a tough day. These are not dramatic moments, but the fact that you see them while everything else is happening is a sure sign your awareness has shifted. Where before it might have been easy to let those moments go unnoticed, now your mind pauses, however briefly, to take them in. When you build a habit of mindfulness, your brain gets better at picking up details, and these little details turn into real feelings of thankfulness. Slowly but surely, gratitude doesn't just show up during happy times, but begins to emerge even when things are difficult. You might start to notice yourself doing simple things differently. Maybe you're making coffee in the morning, and instead of thinking ahead to all the things you have to do, you just notice the smell or the taste. Or you're stuck in traffic, but you catch yourself breathing and realize that you have nowhere urgent to be, or that you're grateful for a podcast or song you're listening to. This isn't about turning every ordinary moment into a celebration, but it's about dropping into what's here and finding something worthwhile, even if it's small. Sometimes gratitude comes from moments you would have rushed through, or from reminders that even if things aren't perfect, there are details worth treasuring. One thing that happens with deeper Buddhist practice is that your gratitude is less tied to getting exactly what you want. If you used to feel thankful only when you got surprising good news or when things worked out for you, you might notice a shift. Instead of waiting for a prize, you're grateful for your ability to breathe, to walk, to take care of yourself, or to have a meal. You could be grateful for your friends, even if you don't see them every day, or for your family, even when you have disagreements. The focus moves from "what do I want" to "what do I have right now?" And that shift can make your experience of daily life a lot richer. Sometimes you may even feel thankful for challenges. That sounds strange at first, but with mindfulness, you notice that the tough times teach you resilience or patience, or remind you who will show up to help. If you're going through a slow period at work, you might realize it gives you time to rest or figure out what really matters. When someone disappoints you, it can lead you to practice forgiveness or set new boundaries. And in hindsight, you recognize the value in those lessons. Again, it's not about sugarcoating hardship. It's about realizing that challenges are part of life, and they can bring you wisdom or insight if you let them. Because gratitude becomes more consistent, it starts to influence how you talk to others and how you move through your routines. If you live with other people, they might hear you thanking them more often for little things. You become softer in your responses, and maybe even more willing to serve others. A smile, making someone tea, sharing a moment of kindness, because you feel in touch with the ways your life is supported by others. There could be times when you simply pause and enjoy listening, giving someone your full attention, and realize in the middle of it that you're grateful just to be present for another person's story. In Buddhist teachings, there is a special appreciation for interconnectedness. The understanding that what happens to you is tied to so many other factors and people you might never meet. Maybe you sit down to eat and realize that your meal only arrived because farmers grew food, workers shipped it, shop owners stocked it, someone in your house cooked it, and even nature delivered sun and rain. You don't have to make a ceremony out of this, but simply pausing to see how many hands went into a single moment makes everyday things feel more precious. This mindset pushes back against feelings of isolation or taking things for granted. Another signal that gratitude is deepening is when you start noticing the absence of things that trouble you. You're grateful not just for what is there, but for what isn't. You appreciate pain-free days if you've had health struggles, or moments of quiet if your life has often been noisy or chaotic. You might be thankful on mornings when you wake up clear-headed instead of stressed. Over time, this broader sense of gratitude takes the focus off constant comparison or longing for something else. It can have a real effect on your mood too. You might notice you're less irritable, less quick to complain, or that when you do get frustrated, you recover faster. The bad moments don't stick to you as much. Even small annoyances, a line at the store, a glitch in your plans, an unexpected delay, lose some of their power to ruin your mood. Gratitude doesn't erase disappointment, but it softens your reaction and brings you back to ground. You know you've been through worse, or you simply have more to enjoy that outweighs the trouble. Another way this shows up is in your relationship with material things. Gratitude inspires you to want less, or at least to appreciate what you have instead of constantly seeking more. You might sense less of the old drive to upgrade or replace, and more of the urge to care for what's yours, your clothes, your home, your tools, because you see the value in them. Spending time nurturing what's in your life right now, instead of chasing what's next, brings a quiet satisfaction that can run much deeper than short bursts of excitement. A surprising part of this journey is how gratitude shifts your memory and attention. Instead of rewinding over old grievances or constantly obsessing about future worries, your mind becomes more trained to notice what's good or what's working. Maybe you end your day thinking about the support you got, something that made you laugh, or progress you made, even if it was just getting out of bed on a tough morning. This rewiring doesn't mean you never struggle, but it does build a habit of noticing positive moments instead of skipping over them while you're lost in thought. There's also the impact gratitude has on your sense of self. When you practice being thankful, you reinforce the idea that who you are right now and what you're capable of matters. You might realize you're grateful for the person you're becoming, for mistakes that taught you, and for the opportunities you have to handle things better. Even when times are rough, appreciating your own effort is a small seed that builds self-worth over time. And gratitude can create small moments of meditation or pause throughout your day, no matter what you're doing. If you're washing your hands or standing in the shower, maybe you just stop and feel grateful for hot water. In the middle of a busy day, you feel thankful for a piece of good news. Or even take a breath and notice that you have everything you need right now. These moments don't fix all your problems, but they give the mind a break from worry and negativity. It's a real form of rest. People often talk about count your blessings, and for some, that can sound like empty advice, especially when life feels overwhelming. Buddhist gratitude isn't about ignoring pain or pretending there are no problems. It's about letting joy and appreciation grow, even together with hardship. In fact, the practice encourages acknowledging what's difficult, but still looking honestly for something good, however small. Little by little, the good moments stack up and remind you that even hard seasons have their bright spots. This ongoing appreciation also helps build resilience. When tough times come, gratitude is a resource. Somewhere inside you, there's still an ability to see what's meaningful. A friend's message, a meal, a warm bed at the end of a draining day. These small things don't always make you feel happy, but they give a base of support to stand on and keep going. The more you practice, the quicker you get at pulling yourself out of a mental rut by naming what's working, what's present, what's still left to value. Over months and years, your sense of gratitude changes your priorities. Maybe you find yourself saying yes to time with friends, or you spend more time outdoors, cook more, or create new habits that make you feel healthy and present. Instead of chasing after what everyone else is doing, you make choices based on what actually brings you appreciation and contentment. Your understanding of success and happiness becomes personal, not dependent on what you see on social media or hear from others. And of course, real gratitude leads naturally to generosity. When you feel full and cared for, it's natural to want to share. This could be loaning a hand to a friend, making a small donation, giving time to someone who needs it, or just showing up with a positive attitude. You feel less possessive because you realize there's always something to give, sometimes a smile, sometimes effort, sometimes a listening ear. These acts of giving aren't about getting a reward or praise. They just grow out of an underlying sense that you are connected to others and that your actions matter. In the long run, living with gratitude means you become more forgiving of yourself and other people. You look at misunderstandings, mistakes, or even hurts with a wider perspective, and you realize everyone is finding their way. You're able to make peace with yourself sooner, and you let go of grudges or envy more easily because there's so much else in your life to appreciate. It's easy to pass gratitude off as something you only think about during major holidays or after big events, but once you're really practicing, it shows up every day. When you take a breath before reacting, when you appreciate good weather, when you find a solution to a problem, or when you spend a few calm minutes with someone you love. Even stressful days offer something, a lesson, a moment that made you laugh, a reminder that you're still moving forward even if it's tough. If you look back after practicing for a while, you'll probably notice gratitude has expanded far beyond what you expected. It's less of a mental exercise and more like a filter on how you see life. You feel quieter inside, less likely to chase after every craving or get upset by every bump in the road. This sense of thankfulness becomes a kind of gentle strength. Not loud, not dramatic, but steady. It does more than just make you nicer or more optimistic. It helps you live your life day by day, with your eyes open to everything there is to enjoy, learn from, and take care of. Gratitude won't erase life's problems, and it doesn't mean you'll always feel upbeat. Some days will still be hard, some moments will still be rough. But once you've tasted what it's like to live with real, honest appreciation, it gets easier to come back to it, like coming home after a long day. You know how to find the small good parts, how to make a dull day brighter, and how to give thanks even when there's nothing flashy going on. All of these changes, quiet as they might seem, are real proof of inner healing and progress along a Buddhist path. A change in what you notice, in what you value, and in what you give back to the world without even having to think about it. When genuine gratitude begins to seep into your daily life, you also start to realize how much of your own suffering used to come from self-judgment and harsh criticism, whether it was about regrets from the past, worries about the future, or just feeling like you never quite measured up. One of the clearest changes for people deepening their Buddhist practice is that their attitude toward themselves and their experiences gets a lot friendlier and way less judgmental. Where you once might have automatically labeled your thoughts, feelings, and even your mistakes as bad or wrong, you now find yourself having a softer, more balanced perspective. It's almost like practicing gives you a permission slip to see things as they are, without flinching or immediately trying to fix, hide, or shame yourself over everything that isn't perfect. You might notice this first during meditation or quiet moments. A thought pops up that used to make you cringe, maybe something embarrassing, or a memory of a time you acted in a way you now wish you hadn't. And instead of tightening up or sinking into shame, you simply notice, that happened. That's a memory. I'm not that moment. Even with difficult feelings like sadness, anger, or anxiety, you're more likely to just observe what's happening, maybe even naming it quietly in your head without adding another layer of blame for experiencing it in the first place. Over time, this habit moves into the rest of your day. Maybe you send an awkward message or miss a deadline at work. You feel that first sting of embarrassment or regret, but it doesn't spiral the way it might have before. You might even catch yourself laughing or just shrugging and saying, "Oh well, next time I'll do better," instead of ruminating about it for hours or even days. This shift away from self-judgment is huge and brings a freedom that's often underestimated by people who haven't experienced it yet. A lot of this comes down to the Buddhist idea of seeing things clearly without adding labels of good or bad, success or failure. When you look at what's happening with curiosity, instead of criticism, uncomfortable thoughts or feelings aren't as scary. They're just part of being alive. The pressure to perform perfectly or to hide parts of yourself that are messy or complicated starts to fade. You gain the confidence to live with all of your experiences, the easy and the hard, without thinking less of yourself just because you have a rough patch. This practice reduces comparison too. Before, you might have measured your life or your abilities against other people, feeling like you always came up short or like you had to keep up a certain image so no one would see the real, imperfect you. As you get more comfortable with your own ups and downs, you start to see that everybody is a work in progress. You realize that the highlight reels you see online or even in conversation don't show the whole picture. Instead of feeling envious or left behind, you become more compassionate toward yourself and toward others, knowing everyone struggles with things you'll never see. Another noticeable thing is how your internal language shifts. For years, you might have run a mental script that scolded, doubted, or second-guessed everything you did. Now, after making a mistake or feeling a negative emotion, that old script gets interrupted. You might say to yourself, "That was tough, but I did my best." Or, "I'm having a rough day, but that doesn't mean I'm failing at life." Even small changes in self-talk can ripple out in big ways. You get used to checking the tone of your thoughts. If they're harsh, you try to soften them. Sometimes you even talk to yourself like you'd speak to a good friend, with patience, understanding, and encouragement. As this non-judgmental stance takes root, your relationship with feedback changes also. It becomes easier to hear constructive criticism or honest feedback without feeling attacked or crushed. You can listen for what's useful, the piece of advice that might help you grow, instead of seeing every suggestion or correction as proof you're not good enough. This makes you more open, less defensive, and more likely to actually improve in areas you care about. It also allows you to set healthier boundaries if someone really is being unfairly critical. You recognize that not all feedback is about you, and not all of it needs to be taken to heart. Daily life gets lighter with this approach. Things that used to set you off or start a spiral of self-criticism become just another part of the day. You might still feel disappointed, worried, or even a little lost sometimes, but those feelings pass through instead of getting stuck. You don't need to analyze every emotion or thought to death. Sometimes you just notice what's up and move on. This saves a lot of mental energy you can use for things that bring you happiness or for the people in your life. Here's something else that shifts: self-compassion. Instead of motivating yourself through shame or harshness, you find it easier to support yourself the way you'd support someone else. If you're tired, you let yourself rest. If you're struggling, you're quicker to ask for help instead of hiding it. If you're proud of something, you let yourself enjoy it without instantly looking for what still needs fixing. This doesn't mean you give up on self-improvement, but you pursue growth from a place of support rather than punishment. Mundane parts of life, cleaning, organizing, errands, also benefit from this perspective. You stop berating yourself for all the things you should have done better or sooner. Instead, you approach tasks with less anxiety because you know everyone drops the ball sometimes, and that missing a detail isn't a sign you're failing. This way of thinking helps you stay motivated and even makes routine jobs a little lighter. Relationships also change. If you used to carry old stories about yourself as the one who can't do anything right or always the problem, those labels get revisited. You talk about mistakes more honestly, apologize when you need to, and then move forward without carrying shame. You give others more space to be imperfect too, which leads to less drama and more kindness all around. When you mess up, you clean it up, but you don't dwell. When others do, you accept their efforts without expecting perfection. This non-judgmental awareness also comes into play with your thoughts and feelings, not just your actions. For example, instead of panicking when anxiety or sadness hits, you let yourself experience it, knowing it's going to change. You might say, "That's just how I feel right now," instead of searching for a way to fix it instantly or feeling guilty for not being happy. Over time, you notice that uncomfortable feelings lose some of their punch when you stop trying to push them away or pretend they're not there. In practical terms, this means fewer cycles of guilt or shame. If you used to feel guilty about snapping at someone, you now notice the feeling, apologize if you need to, and then try to do better next time, without dragging that guilt into the following week. You accept that being human means occasionally falling short, and that these moments don't cancel out your intentions or your efforts. This lets you reset more quickly after an argument or mistake, so each day starts fresher than before. Sometimes you realize you're able to witness even your so-called bad habits or persistent quirks with more patience. Maybe you still procrastinate, get nervous in crowds, or struggle with certain tasks. Instead of seeing these patterns as flaws that need urgent fixing, you view them as challenges you're working with. You give yourself permission to take small steps and celebrate progress, instead of expecting to be perfect all at once. This encouragement is what keeps you motivated, instead of just pushing through with criticism or fear. Another benefit is that you become less likely to label whole days or experiences as bad just because of a setback. A rough interaction or a bad mood doesn't ruin the entire day. You have more ability to notice ups and downs, to have a challenging morning and still end the evening with peace. This flexibility is a big part of what makes life feel easier and less intimidating. You also start to recognize how much of the stress in your life used to come from resisting what was happening or trying to control every detail. When you stop judging every moment and every reaction, you create more space to just be. You give yourself permission to breathe, to try again, and to learn from whatever comes up, without painting yourself as the villain in your own story. Physical well-being often improves too. When you're not constantly tense with worry or self-criticism, your body gets a chance to relax. Many people find headaches ease, their sleep deepens, or they have more energy because there's less mental drama draining them throughout the day. Even your posture changes, a little less tightness in your shoulders, a bit more comfort where you are. Letting go of judgment doesn't make you complacent, and it doesn't mean you don't care. You can still hold yourself accountable, set goals, and strive for improvement. The difference is your motivation shifts. You work and grow because you value yourself, not because you're terrified of criticism or failure. Progress happens more steadily because you aren't burning out from constant self-attack. Even bigger life decisions become easier to handle with this mindset. If you realize something isn't working, a job, a relationship, a habit, you're less likely to stick with it out of shame or stubbornness. You can calmly admit when you need help, change your path, or try something new. Without worrying, it means you failed. That openness is a powerful tool for growth. The way you see others can shift in the same way. Once you become less judgmental of yourself, you naturally start giving other people the same benefit of the doubt. You're more likely to listen, to be patient, and to accept that everyone is figuring life out in their own way. Relationships become warmer, conflicts de-escalate faster, and you build more real connections. It's easier to forgive when you know how vital forgiveness is for yourself too. As this new perspective becomes your default, you might catch yourself feeling more joy in simple moments. When you take a break, enjoy a meal, or spend time with a friend, there's a sense of relief and satisfaction that wasn't there before. You're living in the present, celebrating small wins, and not bogged down by regrets or imaginary expectations. Life still throws curveballs. Some days you'll mess up, get frustrated, or feel down, but with each setback, you have a practice to fall back on. You can observe without adding insult to injury, course correct without panic, and get back to living your life as honestly as possible. Over weeks, months, and years, the background noise of harshness and criticism fades, replaced by something much gentler, a kind of loyalty to yourself and a willingness to grow instead of punish. If you keep going, you build a sturdy inner foundation of acceptance. You're not perfect, and that's not the goal. You're awake in your own life, aware of your thoughts and feelings, and grounded in the knowledge that you can handle what comes next. Not because you won't make mistakes, but because you can face them openly when you do. With this gentler awareness, you actually have more space in your mind and life for the things and people you care about, and that's how you know you're really moving forward on your path. That steady sense of self-acceptance and non-judgmental awareness truly starts to change how you relate to other people too. As you spend less time wrapped up in internal criticism or second-guessing every move you make, you naturally have more room to connect in a meaningful way with the people around you. It's like this mental clutter clears out, and suddenly you can actually be present, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally, when you're talking to someone else. One thing that really stands out when you're healing through Buddhist practice is how much relationships and your style of communication improve, often without you even realizing it at first. Let's start with something that might seem really everyday, like having a conversation. Before you started practicing, your mind may have raced with worries about how you were coming across, what the other person was thinking, or how you were going to defend yourself if something came up. That background noise can make it almost impossible to really listen. But as your mindset shifts, you discover a new kind of calm, both in yourself and in your interactions. When you're talking to someone, you find it easier to give them your full attention. Instead of planning what you'll say next or jumping in with a rebuttal, you actually take in their words and tone. You read between the lines for what someone is feeling, not just what they're saying. This skill can make even simple interactions much fuller and more rewarding. You realize too that by being genuinely present, you help others feel safer and more understood. There's a real difference in the way people engage with you when you give them space to talk, and when they sense that you're not itching to judge or get your own point across immediately. Sometimes people will open up to you more or just seem more relaxed in your company. It's not about being some perfect listener or always saying the right thing. What matters most is your intention and your willingness to really be there, moment after moment. A major area where Buddhist practice often brings powerful change is how you deal with conflict or misunderstanding. Where arguments or disagreements may have turned into long dramas before, you notice now the urge to pause. If someone criticizes you, instead of immediately getting defensive or bursting out in anger, you find a little space to breathe and just take it in. You ask yourself if there's any truth in their words, and if there is, you accept it. If not, you let it go without letting it ruin your whole day. This willingness to pause means fewer fights spiral out of control, and when things do get heated, you're much more willing to talk things out clearly and calmly. Another interesting thing is how honesty grows in your communication. Because you're not beating yourself up in the background all the time or terrified of being judged, you're a lot more likely to speak honestly about what you need, what you feel, and where you're struggling. You can set boundaries without guilt, say no when you need to, or admit when you messed up. At first, this can be scary, especially if you're used to people-pleasing or avoiding tough conversations, but as you practice, you realize that genuine communication, even if it's uncomfortable, actually creates stronger and more open relationships. Patience becomes a lot easier as well. You notice that you're not jumped by irritation every time someone makes a mistake, is late, or forgets something important. Of course, impatience still comes up. Everyone has those days, but you understand it better. You don't let it decide every interaction. You might even become more aware of what triggers your own impatience. But instead of snapping, you take a moment to breathe, gather your thoughts, and respond kindly. Others pick up on this, and it often makes them feel less anxious or pressured around you. Empathy increases too, not just the ability to understand where someone else is coming from, but the willingness to actually put yourself in their shoes. You stop assuming you know everything about someone just from a single action or a first impression. You listen for the full story, stay open to learning new things about people who are close to you, and you're less likely to judge them harshly for their struggles or missteps. Listening, showing encouragement, and even just letting someone feel heard can become second nature. In close relationships, such as with friends, family, or partners, these changes often stand out the most. The normal friction of daily life, little disagreements, habits that used to annoy you, moments of stress, don't escalate as much. You find yourself having more productive arguments, if they happen at all, and you're better at apologizing or forgiving. This doesn't mean you suddenly have perfect relationships, but there's way less drama and more deep-down respect on both sides. You can really see when someone is making an effort and you value their presence, even when it isn't easy. Because your relationships improve, you might discover your social world expands. People like being around someone who listens, who isn't constantly judging, and who brings a sense of ease to conversations. You might attract new friends or deepen friendships you already have. You become someone others trust to open up to, not because you're perfect or always have advice, but because you're willing to sit with them and their feelings, whether that means laughter or tears. In professional and work settings, this shift is practical and visible. You're less likely to get drawn into office gossip, grudges, or politics. If there's friction or disagreement with a team member, you try to clear it up rather than let it simmer. You seek to understand other perspectives before making assumptions, which can improve teamwork and problem solving. When you need to offer feedback or receive it, there's more calm and less ego. Your relationships become more about solving problems and less about chasing approval or avoiding blame. A big part of this change comes from your willingness to admit when you don't know something or when you were wrong. Buddhist practice shows that everyone is working through their own lessons and nobody has every answer all the time. Saying "I need help" or "I was wrong about that" starts to feel safe. In fact, a lot of people see that relationships thrive most not on perfection, but on honesty, trust, and the ability to work through tough moments together. You might notice you have less need to win every disagreement or to prove your point just to feel heard. You start to see that sometimes listening is more important than being right. If someone is upset, your first move is to understand, not immediately to defend your viewpoint. This goes a long way toward diffusing tension and opening up a real conversation. Another outcome of this changing approach is that your generosity grows. Whether it's a willingness to share your time, knowledge, or just good energy, you may find yourself more eager to support others, even in little ways. Helping out isn't about getting recognition, but comes from a real feeling of connection and shared experience. This can cement friendships and even build community in a way that's lasting, rewarding, and doesn't feel forced. With this new approach to relationships, you start to notice a shift even in challenging dynamics, maybe with family members you've clashed with for years or old friends you grew apart from. Without carrying a lot of old judgment or resentment, you can show up to each new interaction with a little more openness. It doesn't mean you have to forget the past or ignore problems, but you can look for common ground, have honest conversations, and decide what's healthiest for everyone involved. Forgiveness also comes more naturally in this space. Instead of holding on to grudges or waiting endlessly for apologies, you let yourself process what happened and then set it down. You might choose to reconnect or to move on, but you do so with peace instead of bitterness. Being able to genuinely forgive, especially after real pain, is a clear sign that your Buddhist practice is settling deeply into your heart and into the way you move through the world. On top of that, the environment you create around yourself just feels better. Reduced drama, more trust, clearer conversations, and a willingness to admit mistakes or ask for help can transform your friendships, working relationships, and family life. Others feel the change even if they can't name it, and often respond in kind, more respectful, more honest, a little braver when sharing what matters to them. It becomes obvious that these changes aren't about manipulating others or getting everyone to like you. They are about creating a more honest, spacious, and supportive way to interact with anyone. the peace you develop inside spreads out, making every connection a little freer and richer. When people feel safe and seen, they tend to offer the same in return, and the impact grows far beyond any single conversation or moment. Even as you continue to grow, you accept that relationships are always changing. People will come and go, conflicts will arise, and no connection will be perfect all the time. What you trust is your ability to approach whatever comes up with care, whether that's a fight that needs healing, a boundary that needs setting, or just a quiet moment of sharing. You feel more capable because you're rooted in mindfulness and patience, not just old habits or reactions. Sometimes what stands out most in your relationships is not the absence of conflict, but your ability to stay grounded in the middle of it. You might have had patterns in the past where tension led you to withdraw, lash out, or try to fix things too quickly. Now, you can breathe, stay put, and work through situations with more honesty. Others are drawn to this steady presence, and it can inspire them to do the same. The sense of support you cultivate makes it easier to weather tough times together. When hard things happen, loss, illness, disappointment, your ability to listen and be real offers comfort. Your patience, honesty, and calm can set the emotional tone for whole families or groups of friends. When something wonderful happens, your joy is genuine and shared, not clouded by envy or competition, because you truly want the best for others. Living this way, your relationships can become some of the deepest sources of healing and meaning. You give more, ask for what you need more directly, and are able to show up as your true self, not as someone you think you're supposed to be. In return, you receive real affection and friendship, not just surface-level niceness. Over the weeks and years, this builds a foundation of trust, warmth, and real joy. Your experience shows that positive change doesn't have to mean chasing perfection or avoiding every misunderstanding. What matters most for healing is your willingness to show up, to listen and speak honestly, and to forgive and reconnect after tough times. Through Buddhist practice, your relationships become more than something you just deal with day to day. They're places where you can be seen, understood, and loved, not because you've checked every box or made no mistakes, but because you're open, resilient, and present for the people who matter most. As your connections with other people become warmer and more genuine, something else starts to change in your daily routine that you might not notice right away. You start paying closer attention to what's actually happening in every ordinary moment. Life doesn't just pass you by like a fast-moving train while you're staring out the window lost in thought. There's a kind of presence that becomes natural, not forced, and it starts showing up in the small things. Making breakfast, pouring a glass of water, walking down your street, even listening to the rain or feeling the sun on your face. Day-to-day routines stop feeling like background noise and become opportunities to experience what's real, to actually enjoy the life you're living as it unfolds, moment by moment, just as it is. When you're healing through Buddhist practice, it's easy to think the main goals are about finally feeling better or never suffering again. But the truth is, one of the most radical changes is just how much more attention and enjoyment you bring to everyday life. It's not flashy or dramatic, rather it's steady and sometimes even quiet. You find yourself able to enjoy a cup of tea, notice the color of the sky, or really listen to a song all the way through without grabbing your phone. It's as if you rediscover senses that had been tuned out by stress, worry, or just being busy all the time. Simple experiences become fuller, deeper, and more nourishing. Part of what makes this possible is that your relationship with distraction changes. In the past, it may have been totally normal to try to multitask your way through every task. Eating while checking emails, texting while talking, or walking while thinking 10 steps ahead. But as mindfulness becomes more natural, you begin to see what you're missing with all that divided attention. The food tastes different when you're not rushing. A walk feels different when you're actually looking around, noticing birds or hearing children play. Even traffic jams or waiting rooms become less frustrating when you bring your focus back to your senses or your breath, instead of spinning off into impatience or planning mode. This presence also means that you're less bothered by boredom. Instead of constantly chasing stimulation or running from uncomfortable silence, you learn to rest and let things be as they are. Doing the dishes can be a quiet, even meditative time. Folding laundry loses its edge of resentment and becomes just a task among tasks. You stop measuring time by how little or how much you achieved, and instead catch yourself enjoying how it feels to move, to smell soap, or to see things get put away. This might sound like a small thing, but bringing presence to routine actions is a big marker of healing. It means your nervous system is settling down and your mind is able to stay in the here and now. One thing that surprises a lot of people is how much more fun they find in things they used to think were boring. When your mind isn't running constant commentary, there's more space for simple, pure engagement. Maybe you notice your own laughter at an old joke, or catch a nice feeling in your chest when a pet curls up next to you. Even more, you begin to look forward to aspects of your routine because you know there's enjoyment buried in all kinds of moments if you're really paying attention. This kind of fullness isn't about adding anything new, it's about being open to what's right in front of you. Another shift is that you start to see your own moods with more clarity. Days are still busy, sometimes stressful, sometimes joyful, but you know how to notice when your mind is wandering, if you're getting lost in memories or worries, and you know how to gently bring yourself back. That skill, to notice when you've left the moment and simply return again, helps you manage stress. Instead of dreading every busy day, you take each part of it as it comes. There is satisfaction that builds in simply doing one thing at a time, with as much attention as you can give. When you show up for your ordinary routines in this way, you notice the space between thoughts. Instead of being swept up in every emotional or mental story, you have more quiet, more rest, even in the middle of a full schedule. Some people describe it as discovering little islands of calm throughout the day. You're not hiding from anything, but you also don't feel so rushed. This can improve your ability to handle challenges too, because you know you can always return to presence, even after a setback or distraction. This doesn't mean you live in a perfect state of peace, nor does it mean you ignore problems or avoid planning for what's ahead. It just means that your baseline is more grounded, less caught in loops of regret or fantasy. Even when you do catch yourself multitasking or lost in a stressful thought, you don't beat yourself up anymore. You just gently refocus on whatever you're doing, cooking, emailing, walking, folding towels, knowing that any moment can be a good chance to reconnect with what's here. Part of this shift comes from a real appreciation for enoughness. You stop looking for happiness only in the big achievements, big trips, or big purchases. There's genuine pleasure to be found in seeing a tidy desk, having a quick chat with a neighbour, or feeling the first warm breeze in the spring. You find joy in completion, in starting something small and finishing it, and in allowing quiet time to be part of your day without guilt. The more you notice these moments, the less power your worries hold, and the more alive you feel even in so-called uneventful days. As presence and enjoyment deepen, your creativity often gets a boost as well. Without so much noise in your head, ideas can flow again. Maybe while you're cooking, showering, or walking, you might get new solutions to old problems or feel like trying things you'd let go, like drawing, gardening, or picking up a language or instrument again. Or maybe you just feel more inspired to connect with others, to send a message, cook a meal, or plan a visit. Mindfulness makes room for imagination and play because you're no longer shut down by relentless worry or criticism. Another way you notice this presence is in how you handle delays and obstacles. If a bus is late, a line is slow, or something breaks, you don't feel your whole day implode the way it might have in the past. Instead, you notice what's around you or take a breath and wait. This means you waste less energy on frustration and instead use waiting times as small pauses, sometimes to reflect, sometimes to rest, sometimes just to observe the world. Life feels less like a series of interruptions and more like a rhythm you can flow with. Over time, as you settle into this style of living, your relationships benefit even more. When you're with someone, you're not half listening, half worrying. You show up, pay attention, and actually engage. People notice this presence and tend to respond with more honesty and interest in return. Even if you have only 10 minutes to connect at the end of a long day, those minutes count more if you're really present than if you're simply there in body but not in mind. Food tastes different when you eat without distraction, whether it's a simple breakfast or something fancy. You start noticing flavors, textures, and even how much you need or don't need. This can bring more balance to how you eat, with less stress or guilt and more appreciation for nourishment. It's one less area where you need to fight or manage yourself. Instead, you listen and respond to what your body is actually asking. Taking care of your environment becomes more thoughtful as well. Cleaning up is less of a battle and more of a way to create space for yourself. You find order and rhythm in routines, which gives a sense of control and comfort. It's not that life suddenly becomes ultra-organized, but the act of paying attention helps things not get overwhelming, or when they do, you know how to break them down, one step at a time. Physical activity might also feel more rewarding. Whether you're going for a short walk or stretching in the morning, you are aware of your feet on the ground, the movement of your body, the sensation of air on your skin. These experiences bring you back to life as it is, instead of using every activity as a means to some future goal or escape. Sometimes a single mindful walk or a few slow stretches is enough to reset your mood or give your brain a break. Presence boosts your appreciation for the ordinary moments you spend with others. Family meals, casual chats, a kid asking for help with homework, laughing with a friend over something random. These events don't need to be extraordinary to be meaningful, and you become less hungry for drama or extreme highs as your satisfaction with the everyday grows. You don't take people or moments for granted, and you know how to stay with a good conversation or a quiet evening without wishing you were somewhere else. Even the way you rest and recharge transforms. When you're enjoying moments as they are, you get more rest from downtime and less temptation to numb out with mindless scrolling, TV, or other distractions. When you do watch something or play a game, you're more selective and intentional, choosing what really brings value or entertainment instead of just filling space. This means your leisure time actually refreshes you instead of leaving you more tired or empty. As you gather up more of these present moments, your overall sense of contentment increases. There's a lightness to your day, a steadiness to your mood, and a deeper trust in your ability to handle whatever comes up because you know how to ground yourself here and now. It also becomes easier to let go of things that steal your attention without adding real value, whether that's habits, roles, or routines that just don't serve your well-being. Some people realize that the need to constantly look for what's next or fear missing out fades a little. You're happier with where you are. You end up worrying less about the past or future because you're finding life right here in the middle of everything that's already happening. This isn't denial or laziness. It's actually a more engaged way to live. You say yes to experiences that truly matter to you and no to things that don't. There's more clarity in your choices. Eventually, this presence supports your ability to handle bigger plans and challenges too. When you do need to think ahead, plan a project, or process something hard, you've trained your mind to come back when you're done, to not stay stuck in worry or replay conversations endlessly. You see that future or past thinking has its place, but the power is in knowing when to return to the present. That discipline, practiced moment by moment, is a real sign that Buddhist practice is sticking and paying off in the flow of your real life. Across months and years, you build a life made up of these clear moments, mindful actions, real enjoyment, genuine connections, and a lot less unnecessary stress. The world doesn't suddenly stop being unpredictable, but you're not thrown by every small thing. You don't need a constant stream of big wins or distractions. The little things become enough, and you start understanding why wisdom traditions have always said the ordinary is, in its own way, extraordinary. Presence in daily life doesn't mean struggle disappears or everything feels perfect all the time. Hard days, fatigue, or bad moods will show up, but you find you can stay with them, breathe through them, and even bring curiosity to what they might be teaching. More often than not, presence turns a tough day into something tolerable, or even full of small moments worth remembering, and that's the gift of healing through Buddhist practice. Not always escape from difficulty, but a new ability to meet it with awareness, steadiness, and sometimes even joy. You see and enjoy what's here, instead of always wishing for something else or wrestling with what can't be changed. That's not just peace you talk about, it's peace you actually live, one day and one moment at a time. Bringing more presence and enjoyment into everyday life often has another effect that can really surprise you. After a while, you start to wake up to something bigger, this quiet but steady sense that your life really means something, not just for yourself, but for others too. Out of all the signs that show healing through Buddhist practice, feeling a sense of purpose and interconnectedness stands out as something that changes the way you live from top to bottom. You almost can't help but see the world with new eyes, as if your story connects with everyone else's in ways you never imagined before. This isn't just about being productive or having lofty goals. It's about realizing that even the smallest choices matter, and that your actions, your words, and your attitude affect a web of people and situations far beyond what you can see. Once you taste real presence in your life, you get curious. Why am I here? What am I really giving or building? Your practice gently nudges you to put those questions at the center, not in a way that's stressful or urgent, but with a sense of gentle responsibility. It's pretty common to notice a shift in your motivation too. You might have started out chasing after career accomplishments, searching for money or recognition, or even just trying to keep up with someone else's expectations. But with Buddhist practice, those outer goals begin to lose some of their grip. What often takes their place is a wish to live with honesty, to offer kindness, and to actually be helpful, whether that's through your job, your relationships, or just your presence in a room. You don't have to become a monk or move to a remote retreat to experience this. Actually, purpose and interconnectedness often show up in small details. Helping someone cross the street, lending an ear when a friend is having a hard day, picking up trash on your walk, or simply showing up to work with an attitude of patience and caring. Over time, you might realize that there are no unimportant tasks. It starts to matter less whether you're in a high-status position or doing something simple. Every bit of energy you put out, every moment of caring you show has an impact, even if the results aren't always visible right away. You get used to thinking, if I help just one person today, that's worth it. That's purpose in action, even if no one else calls it that. Your sense of interconnectedness grows as you reflect on your experiences and pay attention to the ripple effects of your choices. When you've been practicing mindfulness, you notice that your mood spills over. If you're angry or restless, people nearby seem to catch it. If you're calm and attentive, others relax too. You see connections everywhere. The person who makes your morning coffee, the teacher who encouraged you years ago, the neighbors who take care of their yard, the friends you cheer up without even knowing how much they needed it. It sinks in that what you do and how you show up in the world has consequences, both small and big, that go far beyond your own day. This awareness brings a kind of accountability that isn't about guilt or obligation. Instead, it feels more like a privilege, a real chance to shape what happens next, just by the way you speak, react, and choose every day. Buddhist teachings often talk about right intention or right action, but in ordinary life, that often looks like treating the cashier at the store with respect, giving someone the benefit of the doubt, or standing up for what you know is just or fair, even when it isn't easy. You don't have to be perfect, but you want to participate in the world in a way that leaves things a little bit better for others. That desire grows deeper as your practice matures. Purpose also starts to look different than it might have before. You get less wrapped up in comparison with friends, co-workers, or even your younger self. You're less interested in chasing milestones that aren't really your own. Instead, your sense of purpose becomes more personal. Maybe you want to raise kind kids, create art that moves people, lead a team with integrity, or just leave every interaction a little gentler than you found it. The scale doesn't matter as much as the feeling that you're contributing to something good and real. It's common to discover that your everyday values shift. What once looked like sacrifice, sharing, making time for others, even saying no to easy shortcuts, now feels natural. Generosity becomes attractive, not forced. Maybe you notice you give more, whether it's time, knowledge, encouragement, or simple patience with others' shortcomings. You don't need grand gestures to feel like you have a purpose. Living each day with an open heart, finding ways to support people, and caring for things and beings around you becomes its own kind of meaning. With interconnectedness comes a new level of humility. You realize there's a near infinite number of things you don't know, people you'll never meet, and moments you'll never witness. But you also get that you're still part of a bigger pattern. When you look back at all the influences in your life, teachers, parents, friends, random strangers who gave you advice or encouragement, you see that your own path is built up from countless moments of kindness and connection. Your gratitude increases and you want to pay it forward for the next person, knowing you might never see the long-term effects. In practical terms, this might mean seeking work or projects that align with your values. You may lean toward professions or hobbies that let you serve or help, even if in small, low-profile ways. Or you might choose to volunteer, get involved in your local community, or support causes that matter to you. Even if you're in a job that doesn't feel glamorous, you carry yourself with a sense of dignity and responsibility, aiming to do your best and treat co-workers with fairness. Work stops being just a chore and becomes an avenue for expressing what matters to you, at least in small acts and choices day to day. Sometimes you notice that your attitude toward difficult situations changes too. Hardships and setbacks are still tough, but you see them in the context of something bigger. When things don't go your way, you wonder what you can learn, how you can help, or what the experience might mean for someone else. You ask different questions. How can I respond with integrity? Whose struggle isn't being noticed here? What will actually make a difference in the long term? These questions anchor you, even on days when nothing makes sense. You also realize that you can't control or fix everything. Some problems are just bigger than any single person. But you see that you still have influence. Buddhist practice teaches not to underestimate the power of one voice, one action, or one kind exchange. If you can ease one person's stress, brighten one bad day, or open one mind to a new idea, that's real and powerful. Over time, you give up striving for fame or constant recognition because the rewards from meaningful connection turn out to be much deeper and longer lasting. This sense of purpose helps you deal with doubt. When you wonder if you're doing enough, if your efforts matter, or if you're on track, you recall that life is interconnected. Maybe you'll never see the results, but what you do has meaning anyway. You recognize that healing isn't just an internal journey, but something you confirm and strengthen by showing up outside yourself, in service, listening, or just not giving up on being kind. The idea of a separate, isolated self fades, not because you lose your individuality, but because you're more interested in where your strengths can help, where your experiences can teach, or where your mistakes can encourage someone else not to give up. You start to see that nobody's success is only their own, and that every person has a story shaped by everyone else's stories. You feel a responsibility, but it's a joyful one. This way of living spills over into your closest relationships, family, friends, loved ones. You become a more steady presence in their lives, not because you never struggle, but because your sense of meaning isn't toppled by every disappointment or challenge. When someone comes to you for advice or comfort, you listen with the intention to help, rather than just putting your own worries first. You value time together. Meals, phone calls, or walks become rituals that remind you of what really matters. Bigger world issues start to matter more too. You may become more conscious about what you buy, how your choices affect the environment, and even how the products you use or the brands you support impact distant communities. You see how easy it is to ignore inconvenient facts and are more willing to take small steps to align your actions with what you believe, whether it's consuming less, supporting ethical businesses, or participating in efforts to clean up your neighborhood. Changes like these seem small, but multiplied across many people, they can be huge. You know now that acting with awareness matters. Purpose is also what helps you get through tough phases of doubt, fear, or burnout. When you're tired or discouraged, you come back to the reminder that simply living with care is enough. Even if your influence seems tiny, you trust in the possibility of change because you've experienced it yourself. Some days, purpose is just getting out of bed, making a meal, and reaching out to one friend. On other days, it's tackling big jobs and inspiring people around you. Either way, you don't judge your worth by the scale of your actions, but by the presence, honesty, and courage you bring. Healing through Buddhist practice isn't about having all the answers or getting to a destination where nothing hurts. It's more about touching the world with the understanding that you're part of it, and that all your actions, no matter how small, are threads in a larger pattern. That outlook lets you see beauty and potential around you all the time. You root less of your confidence in being praised and more in living according to your core values, day in and day out. You might notice you feel less pressure to be impressive, clever, or successful in the traditional sense. The drive for constant achievement is replaced by a hope to leave places and people better than you found them. Your interactions become less strategic and more real. People tend to feel this. There's less superficial charm and more genuine care that's obvious, whether you're close friends or total strangers. You're not just performing, you're participating, and it feels solid. As purpose and interconnectedness settle in, your priorities continue to shift. Time becomes precious, not as a resource to manage, but as the medium through which you live out your values. You say yes to what truly matters, set healthier boundaries, and let go of the race to be everywhere and everything. You find more satisfaction in quality than in quantity. Fewer distractions, deeper conversations, more real rest, and acts of giving that actually matter to you. Sometimes you even surprise yourself by how much resilience you develop. Knowing you're part of something bigger means setbacks, rejections, or disappointments don't rock you the way they once did. No one is immune to loss or tough times, but you have a basic trust that your intentions and presence matter. That backbone makes it easier to show up again, to try once more, to forgive and keep going, even when things are uncertain. People often talk about legacy as something you leave behind at the end of a long life. But with Buddhist practice, legacy becomes something you create every single day. Every smile, every time you help, every act of patience or courage is a seed planted somewhere. You may never know which moments matter most or to whom, and that's okay. You trust that living with intention is its own reward, and sometimes the best results can't be measured at all. By now, your sense of self-worth grows less from outside approval and more from an inner knowing that you're living in alignment with what matters to you. This removes a lot of internal conflict. You feel less anxious about choices and less likely to compare your timeline with others. You have your sense of direction and you're okay with taking the slow route, especially if it lets you move with more integrity. In day-to-day life, you become more attuned to wonder and compassion. Whether you're watching the sunrise, hearing someone's story, or simply doing an ordinary task, you realize you're part of a bigger narrative. You look for chances to lighten burdens, welcome new faces, and appreciate moments before they pass. This is a satisfaction that lingers, giving you energy to keep investing in what and who you believe in most. There's no one-size-fits-all path for finding purpose or feeling interconnected. It's not a checklist you complete so much as a way of showing up for life. Some days, it's clear and bold. Other times, it's quiet and steady. Through Buddhist practice, purpose becomes less about the big what and more about how you live, the compassion, attention, and care you bring to every situation. As interconnectedness deepens, so does your ability to live a life that matters, not just to yourself, but to the world around you, beginning with the very next thing you do.